really pick up the relief there, you see, Giles? And from that basis, you can draw the actual stratigraphy.
You've always got to think of it as being seen through the eyes of an educated Chinese, for whom anyone beyond the empire.
Millions visit Angkor Wat every year, but how many know what lies beneath their feet? The world's largest religious monument rises like heaven itself, perfect, balanced, eternal. Yet deep under its foundations, new scans have found a sealed chamber untouched for 900 years. When archaeologists opened it, the air that escaped was older than the empire that built it, and what they found inside was never meant to be uncovered. The temple that shouldn't exist. Angkor Wat is one of the largest and most complex structures ever built. Located in Cambodia, it covers more than 400 acres and was constructed by the Khmer Empire in the early 12th century.
I've never seen a culture like it elsewhere in Southeast Asia in terms of manipulating the landscape.
The temple's towers rise high above the surrounding forest, and its moats still hold water centuries later. It was designed to serve as both a home for the gods and a symbol of royal power. What continues to puzzle experts is how such precision was achieved without modern tools. The stones fit together perfectly, the symmetry is exact, and the entire complex aligns with astronomical points that would have been impossible to calculate with the knowledge of that time. For centuries, monks, travelers, and historians described Angkor Wat as heaven on earth, a place they called pure and perfect, untouched by human flaw. Its towers were said to represent the home of the gods, and its long corridors mirrored the journey from the human world to the divine. But new research has started to change that view. Using ground-penetrating radar, scientists discovered several sealed spaces deep beneath the central foundation of the temple. The shapes of these cavities do not match any known structural design, and their placement suggests they were hidden deliberately. According to reports from both Cambodian and international research teams, the voids were filled and sealed long after the temple's construction was completed. No one knows why this was done, but the finding has forced archaeologists to question whether something was intentionally buried beneath the holiest part of Angkor Wat. To learn more about what might be hidden underground, researchers began studying the carvings on the temple's walls. The walls are covered with thousands of detailed images showing gods, warriors, and dancers, each one carefully arranged. At first, they seemed to be ordinary religious scenes, but when experts looked more closely, they noticed something strange. Certain figures and patterns repeated at fixed distances, forming a sequence that did not match the flow of any known myth or story. Some specialists suggested that these carvings might contain coded measurements or directions that guided the layout of the temple. In their view, the artwork could have doubled as an architectural map or record of secret knowledge. Other archaeologists rejected the theory as unlikely, but even they agreed that the repetition seemed intentional and difficult to explain. The structure itself only deepened the mystery. Each sandstone block fits into the next so tightly that no adhesive or mortar was needed. The joints remain sealed even after centuries of storms and heat. Surrounding the entire temple is a massive rectangular waterway known as the Mouhot. It looks like a lake, but it was carefully engineered. To scientists and engineers, this structure is one of the most advanced water systems of the ancient world. It helps keep the ground firm, protects the temple from floods, and even cools the stones during the hottest months. But to the local people, the Mouhot has a deeper purpose. According to long-held beliefs, it marks the border between the human world and the realm of the gods, and possibly something far darker below. Monks teach that it was built not only for protection, but also to imprison whatever lies beneath the temple. Those warnings are now being taken seriously again. Many now wonder if Angkor Wat was built not only to reach the heavens, but also to lock away what lies below them. And to uncover that answer, researchers have turned back to the man who demanded such perfection, the god-king who believed he could build paradise itself. The king who built heaven. 900 years ago, a king in the heart of Southeast Asia set out to do what no ruler before him had dared. His name was Suryavarman II, leader of the Khmer Empire, and he wanted to leave behind more than a kingdom. He wanted to build eternity. His empire stretched across what is now Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, and Vietnam. Yet the king was not satisfied with territory. He wanted a monument that would outlive both his dynasty and the land itself. According to inscriptions, Suryavarman saw himself as more than a man.
Well, I'm not sure about that. He would have been a fine king had he been able to do that for any length of time. But what we do know...
He claimed to be chosen by the god Vishnu, destined to unite heaven and earth through architecture. What he ordered next would become one of the largest building projects in history. He wanted a temple that mirrored the universe, a stone version of Mount Meru, the sacred mountain said to be the home of the gods. The central tower would represent the highest peak. The four smaller towers around it would stand for the other summits of creation. Around this divine center, he demanded an artificial sea that would separate the world of gods from that of men. Historical records show that tens of thousands of laborers and artisans were summoned from across the empire. Sandstone was quarried more than 50 kilometers away and transported along rivers using rafts and bamboo sleds. Each block was cut by hand and polished until it fit perfectly into place. The work continued day and night, guided by priests who oversaw every measurement and alignment. They followed sacred geometry, ensuring that every path, staircase, and gallery pointed toward the rising sun. Each step upward symbolized the spiritual climb from the mortal world to the heavens. According to royal texts, Suryavarman believed that by completing this structure, he would become the earthly form of Vishnu. The temple would not only serve as his offering to the gods, but also as his gateway to immortality. To his people, he would be seen as both ruler and divine being. After his death, the Khmer Empire began to weaken. Years of costly wars, internal power struggles, and shifting trade routes drained its strength. Without Suryavarman's leadership, the unity that had built Angkor Wat started to crumble. Yet even as the empire fractured, the great king's temple remained standing, untouched by time or war. Generations passed, and the purpose behind many of its hidden chambers was forgotten. The inscriptions faded, and the rituals that once filled the courtyards fell silent. Yet among those who lived near the temple, the silence itself became part of its story. They began to say that the God King's work had not ended with his death, and that something he left behind still moved beneath the stones of Angkor Wat. Whispers beneath the stones. Centuries after the fall of the Khmer Empire, Angkor Wat remained standing, but the world around it changed. The jungle grew thick, the roads disappeared, and most of the land returned to silence. Yet the people who lived nearby never treated the temple as abandoned. To them, it was still alive. According to villagers, certain corners of Angkor Wat felt different from the rest. The air there was heavier, the wind slower, and birds refused to perch on the stones. Some said that the ground beneath those spots gave off a hollow sound when struck, as if something inside was waiting to be heard. Older monks told stories about what they called restless ground. They claimed that the temple was not only a map of heaven, but also a lid placed over something below it. In their view, Angkor Wat stood at the point between two worlds, one divine and the other cursed. Disturbing that balance, they warned, could open what was meant to stay closed. The monks advised their followers to stay away from specific walls where the air felt thick or where light faded suddenly for no reason. According to oral tradition, those who ignored the warnings faced consequences. There were tales of travelers who tried to remove stones or pry open carved doors and never returned. Local families passed down the same phrase for generations: "Do not wake those bound beneath the lotus towers." It became more than superstition. It was a rule of survival. When colonial explorers arrived centuries later, they brought modern tools and skepticism, but even they could not ignore what happened inside the temple. Reports from early restoration teams mentioned strange resistance while working in certain areas. Chisels dulled quickly, oil lamps flickered without wind, and a few workers fell sick for reasons no doctor could explain. Some left the project altogether, saying the temple did not want to be disturbed. The carvings also raised questions. The serpent gods known as Naga appeared across many walls, coiling protectively around doorways and altars. However, in some sections they faced downward instead of outward, their eyes fixed on the ground. Local shamans interpreted this as a warning. They believed these Naga were not guardians, but watchers placed to seal something underneath. The carvings, they said, were not decoration, but marks of containment, ancient symbols that locked away power or punishment. Despite the fear, curiosity never faded. Traders, missionaries, and explorers from Europe began to hear these stories, each one describing a temple that was both sacred and dangerous. They were told that the land beneath Angkor Wat breathed when storms passed, and that the sound of thunder was not from the sky, but from under the ground. According to local accounts, the monks pleaded with the newcomers to leave it undisturbed. Few listened. Curiosity always wins over caution. As decades went by, the rumors drew attention from scholars who wanted to see for themselves what was hidden beneath the jungle's canopy. Eventually, one man from France would push further than anyone else. He would travel into the Cambodian wilderness and step straight into a mystery that had been buried for centuries. When the jungle swallowed the ruins and time erased their history, that man's journey would reopen the first crack in Angkor's ancient seal. The stranger in the jungle. In 1860, a French naturalist named Henri Mouhot began a journey through the jungles of Cambodia. His mission was simple. He wanted to collect plants, insects, and wildlife specimens for European museums. At the time, little was known about the dense wilderness that stretched across the region, and most maps showed nothing but blank space. Mouhot expected hardship, but what he found went far beyond anything he had imagined. As he moved deeper into the forest, the air grew heavier, and the ground turned to thick mud. His notes described heat so intense that his boots stuck to the earth and leeches clung to his legs. Days passed before he saw anything unusual. Then, one morning, through a break in the trees, he saw straight lines where none should exist. The jungle canopy opened to reveal shapes that did not belong to nature. In front of him stood colossal towers covered in vines, their tips piercing the sky. At their base were walls carved with faces of forgotten gods. The stairs seemed to disappear into the shadows, and silence surrounded everything. Mouhot had stumbled upon Angkor Wat, a structure that even many in neighboring villages believed to be cursed. His journals described his first sight of it as overwhelming. He wrote that it was grander than any building in Europe, and that the scale of it felt almost impossible. But his wonder soon turned to confusion. While exploring the corridors, he discovered that some tunnels abruptly ended in solid walls. Others curved in circles and led back to where he started, as if designed to disorient anyone who entered. His records mention rooms that end in silence and chambers sealed tightly with mortar from the inside. He could not understand who had built such passages or why. When Mouhot's drawings and reports reached Paris, they caused a sensation. To many Europeans, Angkor Wat became proof that Southeast Asia had once held a civilization far more advanced than anyone had believed. Scholars and explorers rushed to study his work, but when his journals were prepared for publication, several pages were missing. Among them were sketches of strange depressions near the Western Gate that Mouhot had described but never fully explained. Decades later, archivists who re-examined his surviving papers found scorch marks along the edges, as though someone had tried to burn certain sections. There is no record of who removed the missing pages or why.
Prehistory of this place, at least of Cambodia, is not well known.
Some historians suggest it was accidental. Others believe the omissions were deliberate, possibly to hide parts of his findings that could not be explained. Henri Mouhot never returned to Angkor Wat. He died months later in Laos, reportedly from fever, though some accounts claim his death came suddenly and without clear cause. After his death, the jungle began to reclaim the paths he had cleared. For years, no one dared to retrace his steps. What Mouhot discovered reignited global fascination with the ruins, but he had only seen the surface. What he could not finish, modern science would. A century later, lasers would pierce the same jungle canopy and uncover a hidden world beneath the ground. The hidden city that breathed. In the early 2010s, a team of archaeologists returned to Angkor Wat with new technology that promised to reveal what the human eye could not. They used Lidar, an airborne laser system that scans the ground from above and creates three-dimensional maps. For years, dense vegetation had hidden most of the surrounding landscape, but this time, the jungle had nowhere to hide. The lasers cut through the canopy, and when the data returned, the image shocked the scientific community. Beneath the jungle canopy, the scans revealed something no one expected. On the computer screens, clear outlines of straight roads, canals, ponds, and large square foundations began to appear. These shapes formed the layout of a vast city that had once surrounded the temple. It was not a small community built for monks or pilgrims. It was a full metropolis that stretched for miles in every direction, complete with neighborhoods, water systems, and planned streets. The discovery proved that Angkor Wat had never stood alone. It had been the spiritual and political heart of a massive urban center that once rivaled the size and complexity of ancient Rome. But while most of the research team focused on the city's scale, a smaller group noticed something unusual inside the data. Deep within the Lidar readings, beneath the main sanctuary of Angkor Wat, they found geometric shapes that did not belong to natural formations. The voids were too symmetrical, too deliberate, and far deeper than the ceremonial pits known from other temples. When the team compared their digital maps to Henri Mouhot's old sketches from 1860, the shapes lined up almost perfectly with the sealed tunnels and serpent carvings he had once described. That finding sparked immediate debate. Some experts dismissed the shapes as errors caused by interference or gaps in the data. Others argued that they were the remains of unknown chambers intentionally hidden by the original builders. There was no agreement, only questions. Still, the evidence was too striking to ignore. What had begun as an archaeological mapping project was quickly turning into something else entirely. By the 2020, a new international team decided to go further. They wanted to see beneath the stone itself. Using ground-penetrating radar and microseismic sensors, they began to scan the temple from the surface down to its foundation. At first, the readings were ordinary, layers of compacted sand, thick stone, and bedrock. Then the instruments began to pick up long, hollow lines running horizontally under the sanctuaries. The radar showed that these voids were lined with unusually dense stone, far stronger than anything used above ground. The data made little sense. Engineers reported that the readings did not reflect sound normally. Instead, the waves seemed to disappear inside the gaps, as if the underground structure absorbed noise completely. The phenomenon was so strange that one researcher called it the mountain's breath. Midway through the scans, the team began to experience sudden technical failures. Equipment flickered, cables shorted, and parts of the western walkway collapsed without warning. When the monitors came back online, the screens displayed faint carvings of intertwined serpents wrapping around human figures. Local workers refused to continue. Monks warned the team that they were awakening what had been buried. They said that the serpent carvings were signs of the watchers beneath, ancient guardians meant to contain forces not meant for the surface world. Some researchers dismissed the warnings as superstition, others hesitated. But funding deadlines and international attention left no room for retreat. The team pushed forward, determined to uncover the truth. At dawn, they prepared to break through the surface for the first time. What had begun as a study of lost history was about to become something else entirely. For the first time in 900 years, Angkor Wat would breathe again. The Chamber of Blood. The entrance to the chamber was barely wide enough for one person to crawl through. It looked more like an air vent than a doorway, and it was sealed so tightly that sensors showed almost no oxygen inside. When the team finally loosened the last slab, a sharp hiss broke the silence. A rush of trapped air escaped, carrying the metallic scent of rust mixed with something foul. One technician later said the smell was unlike anything he had experienced before, the stench of decay that had been trapped in the dark for almost 900 years. The first lights revealed a narrow tunnel with blackened walls. The air was thick and metallic, making breathing difficult. Some of the researchers felt dizzy after only a few minutes. As they moved deeper, the carvings came into view. They were not decorative. The serpents that had once symbolized protection were now shown in scenes of violence. Each naga had its fangs buried into the necks of men and women, the victims' eyes carved wide in terror. The walls were blistered, as if scorched by fire long ago. It looked less like a holy place and more like a warning. At the far end stood a massive stone door sealed with hardened mortar. Across its surface were faint markings that resembled ancient Sanskrit. A few lines were still readable, describing a ritual of feeding and binding. It took hours of chiseling to loosen the slab. When it finally cracked open, the first flash of light inside froze everyone in place. The floor was not made of stone. It was made of bones. Human remains were arranged in circular patterns around a single altar. Skulls, ribs, and vertebrae had been placed with unsettling precision, forming rings that grew wider toward the walls. Copper wires bound many of the skeletons at the wrists. These were not graves, they were displays. Closer inspection revealed that the bones had been intentionally cut, not broken. Near the center, several skulls carried markings burned directly into the surface. Some of them bore symbols identical to those carved above ground, while others carried short inscriptions. According to translators, one phrase appeared repeatedly: "Those who failed the gods, build again below." That discovery raised disturbing questions. Some experts suggested that these were the remains of workers who died during construction. Others believed they were killed as part of ritual offerings to the gods the temple was built for. One account from a field assistant described a narrow pit near the back wall filled with smaller bones, dozens of them. He believed they belonged to young laborers who had vanished during the temple's construction. On the altar, several copper bowls were discovered, each lined with a dark hardened residue. Laboratory analysis later detected traces of proteins and iron compounds consistent with dried human and animal blood. The mixture appeared to have been heated repeatedly, leaving behind a thick layer of burnt material fused to the metal. Above the altar, carved directly into the wall, was an inscription that read, "The blood below feeds the gods. Break this chamber, and their hunger returns." The team fell silent. Some refused to re-enter the room. No one could explain the number of bodies or the precision with which they were arranged. According to reports, one of the senior archaeologists collapsed after leaving the site, claiming he could still feel the heat of the room hours later.
That kind of small sanctuaries spread all around the area.
When news of the discovery reached officials, the site was sealed without delay. Only a few photographs and data samples were released. What the team found inside that chamber changed everything scholars believed about Angkor Wat. It was no longer just a temple of beauty or devotion. It was a monument built on fear, silence, and blood. As panic spread among the team and the world demanded answers, the site was officially closed for safety reasons. But those who entered that chamber knew the truth. Once the slab was opened, something ancient had been disturbed, and it would not sleep again. The silence after the discovery. In the weeks after the discovery, the world waited for answers. Instead, officials released a short statement calling it structural excavation damage. They claimed the team had broken into an unstable cavity. But leaked photos told a different story. Walls blackened by fire, remains arranged in circles, and copper bowls still resting on the altar. The images vanished within hours, yet the story had already spread. Archaeologists who studied the limited data disagreed on what the chamber represented. Some believed it was evidence of ritual offerings meant to sustain the gods of the Khmer Empire. Others argued it was a burial site misinterpreted by modern researchers. Religious leaders in Cambodia described it as a symbol of balance, heaven above and sacrifice below, the harmony between creation and destruction that defined the ancient world. While experts debated, locals reported strange tremors near the western moat. Monks said the ground was breathing again, claiming it shifted slightly at night. Engineers later confirmed small vibrations in the area, but found no geological cause. Soon after, UNESCO restricted further access to the lower levels of the temple. Scaffolding appeared over the central tower, and satellite images showed new construction, but no official explanation was ever given. Today, Angkor Wat stands as it always has, beautiful, silent, and seemingly untouched. Tourists walk its paths unaware of what lies beneath their feet. The moats still glimmer under the sun, the towers still rise above the forest, but those who entered the chamber say the temple feels different now. The air is heavier, the silence deeper, as if something below has awakened. If Angkor Wat truly hides the remains of something ancient, was it built to honor the gods or to contain them? And if one chamber was sealed for 900 years, could there be others still waiting beneath the stone? Tell us what you think in the comments below.